That's all for this one, but you can see more by clicking on the videos here. Like this video and subscribe to get even more great content. Don't forget to ring the bell so you can get notified whenever I upload a new and awesome video. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and more. Just check out the links in the description. Make sure you also check out the Rune Spells series and my 99-cent short stories. You can get all of that free by becoming a patron and supporting me on Patreon. Stay safe and keep writing! Alright, welcome everyone to Practically Writing. I am your host, Sarah Berman, and we've got some lawn mowing going on outside, so sorry if there's a slight buzz in the background, but you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Alright, today, the topic du jour is tropes, specifically female characters in urban fantasy. These are some of the tropes that have caught my attention, whether that's good, bad, or ugly. We're going to find out. We're going to look at them. We're going to talk about them. That's how it's going to work. Now, some of these tropes are definitely going to be applicable to other characters or not necessarily female-centric, but you tend to see them a lot in female characters in urban fantasy. The first one that we see a lot in is the Cassandra truth or Cassandra complex or, something like that. Based on the Greek myth of Cassandra, she's the daughter of the king of Troy, and she has a prophetic gift. Now, this gift is, in fact, accurate, and despite this, nobody believes her. And that is in part because of a curse. The reason I think that this trope is A, problematic, B, realistic, and C, not going anywhere is because at its core, it's kind of misogynistic. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but you don't see many guys who have the Cassandra complex. The prophetess is the one who is not believed. And I think that has a lot to do with the historical nature of women not being believed. Whether we knew things or not, there were a lot of times where we were dismissed as being like we couldn't possibly know or we couldn't possibly understand it simply because of the lack of dangly bits between our legs. The fact is, it is incredibly realistic to a lot of the lived experiences of women. It's also problematic because it is so realistic to the lived experiences of a lot of women. I can't really say for certain, but I would not be surprised if this isn't something that is also the lived experience of gender non-binaries and trans women as well. Generally, if you are not a man, historically, if you are not a man, you don't have a platform to stand on to be believed as, like just a person. I think that in a lot of ways, this trope is necessary to call attention to that. And it is best approached as this is something that is not great. This is something that will come back and bite you. You don't believe women, you're going to get screwed. So that is a very popular trope. And I know quite a few urban fantasy and fantasy writers who happen to be women, coincidentally, who really lean into this particular trope because it is so similar to their own lived experiences. Starting out with a hot topic, aren't we? The second trope I would like to address is what is called cute monster girl. So you have essentially a very non-human humanoid being who happens to be female and also happens to be, cute or otherwise aesthetically pleasing. And this is problematic for several reasons. You have a tendency for these humanoid species who are actually like bird or lizard types, and they have boobs. and they have childbearing hips. And it's like there is no biological reason for that humanoid species to develop to mimic our mammalian aesthetic so closely. They're like it just doesn't happen. Like that that's not how biology works. And the reason that it's truly problematic is because it means that the species and the character are less important than the aesthetic. And that for one reason or another, I mean, mileage may vary. Gonna just throw that out there. Mileage may vary, but in my personal experience, and in the experience of people that I've spoken with, generally it just comes across as objectifying the female form. And oh, look, wings. Okay, but bird species don't have boobs. Or ooh, lizard person. Okay, lizard species don't have boobs. Going back to that over and over again. So it becomes more about this hot chick who just happens to have scales or feathers, because the objectification of any person as a sexual object, it isn't very proactive. It isn't very forward thinking. It's it ignores so many variations in body type, in what people find attractive, and in really digging into the metaphorical nature of species, or humanoid species rather. We create humanoid species to hold the other category in a lot of what we write. And that can be approached with awe, or it can be approached with fear, or whole sliding scale in between. Plus I'm pretty sure there's a y-axis in there too. Reducing it down to the attractiveness of the female to a human male, especially a human male with the aesthetic leanings of this current society, kind of undermines the entire point of so many aspects of spec fic. Now, that's not to say that it can't be done or it should never be done, because, I mean, your story is your story, and sometimes that is the point. But I think that taking a second look at whether or not that is absolutely necessary is something that we should be more cognizant of doing. And I kind of run into this problem with one of the stories that I'm working on, which is about a a human woman and an AI who identifies as masculine, don't ask, and they have a psychic bond. And so the story, stripped of all its sci-fi trappings, is kind of an exploration of the nature of love, because there is no physicality to it. There is no, it's not about the attractiveness of the form, it's about the attractiveness of the mind. And so very demisexual, demi-romantic, etc. But I think that there's a lot of missed opportunities to explore that with different body types through the alien humanoid female form being not the aesthetic of, you know, early 21st century Western culture. So the third trope is the ever popular human girl just can't decide between two guys. And I'm going to approach the subtrope first, wherein those two guys are werewolf and vampire. Because really, it's always werewolf and vampire, isn't it? Always. Like, I mean, not always, always, but always. Like, there's a distinct trend there. The interesting aspect of it is okay, so I may travel in several circles that include polyamory as a very acceptable and not at all unique lifestyle. So, most of my conversations around this are like, why not both? Like if you actually have that much trouble choosing, just pick both. Come on. Sit them down and be like, boys, one of you gets odd days, one of you gets even days. Whatever. Yes, I realize that that's usually a problem because the vamps don't like the wolfies and the wolfies don't like the vamps, and the idea of sharing anything with them would be like horrible. But it's just kind of old hat to have the most significant thing happen in a teenage girl's life. Because, again, usual things. The usual thing that happens is the teenage girl trying to pick between a werewolf who might be her own age, but is also like, you know, usually very, very different in a lot of different ways, and a vampire who is possibly more like her in culture and upbringing, but also possibly a couple hundred years old. It's neither one of those is great choices because it's not about biology at that point. It's about, yeah, he looks 17. Okay, but his brain didn't stop working and he didn't stop collecting experience, and that experience is going to change him from being just a teenager. The problem with this is that even though the teenage girl is the central character of the book, she's not really a person at that point. The thing is, okay, so I enjoy a good paranormal romance as much as the next person. In fact, I will consume it a lot. I love it. I know it's not supposed to be realistic. It's not even supposed to be like fully PC or anything like that. It is fantasy. And more importantly, it is sexual fantasy. I get that. That notwithstanding, the story tends to go more towards, vamps versus werewolves and not the choices that the human female girl character needs to be making. And it kind of devolves into a who wins situation rather than what is best for her or what is best for anybody, really. There's so much about it that makes people uncomfortable, especially people who engage in any kind of critical thinking over it. Sure, it's fun to consume at the moment. I would say that my biggest problem with it is when people try to make it anything more than a romance. It should be paranormal romance, not urban fantasy, because the central story is going to be the romance. Yeah, you might shoehorn in some other problems, the wolf versus vamp war or whatever. When you start to have two different guys fighting over a girl, whether or not, they're wolf and vampire, but any love triangle trope in especially in urban fantasy, it almost reduces the story down to who she picks, and even the success of whatever subplots there are. All of that seems to come down to who she picks. And that is very reductionistic. I feel like a broken record here. Again, it's not that it can't be done right. It's just that it very seldom is and probably isn't the best thing to do for a story that is not solely romance. But that, of course, is just my opinion. And what do I know? We are going to talk about the big one, the Mary Sue. Now, Mary Sue is not genre specific, but does have distinct genre trends. And in urban fantasy, you generally have a clumsy, unpopular girl who, either through fate or, eventually through, something happening like being turned into a vampire or discovering she's a werewolf or something else, becomes an epic version of herself. But isn't that kind of what we read books for too? Like we want to see ourselves as kind of a not lost cause. Like I wish I could do gymnastics, so, sometimes I just do the fantasy thing. It's great. So much better than like years and years of training. So because of that, I don't think that the Mary Sue trope is nearly as bad as people make it out to be. I think the problem with the Mary Sue trope is that there isn't enough creativity in approaching it. You want to be an epic version of yourself? Okay, why is that epic version always the same? We want to be the best, but that best isn't based on what we as individuals want to be the best. It tends to be more of a societal agreement on what's the best. So you have a Mary Sue who becomes an epic fighter. The smart, nerdy girl became an epic fighter. Why not a master negotiator? Like can stop any fight simply by talking people down. Like, so epicness. And even better is when you give her the choice. Like, maybe she is an epic fighter, but she still carries forward that respect and, dare I say, even natural inclination to depend on her intellect first. So she has the physical prowess to knock you on your butt, but she tries to negotiate with you first, kind of thing. Stuff like that. It takes the Mary Sue from being a generic, epic character to a more individual character. And I think when you have things like that, it's much more realistic and it appeals to people more because people's values don't necessarily change just because they got magical abilities. Like, if you could all of a sudden do a backflip without having to practice or anything, do you think that that would suddenly become your mode of transportation? Why? Like, you might do it a couple of times. You might spend a whole day just being like backflip, backflip. But is that literally going to become your default setting? Probably not. The adding more realism to the process, to the choices made, and to the even the epicness that is given to a Mary Sue, will take that from a tropey and, quite frankly, often shallow character to somebody who just has this thing happen to them, and you're still about the character and how they deal with that. Okay, so that is a collection of the tropes, cliches, etc., specifically surrounding females in urban fantasy. Yes, there's a lot of crossover. All of those boundaries are fuzzy wuzzy was a bear. That's okay. Because the point is, we just need to think about these things. We need to be cognizant of them so that we don't fall into these. I won't even say bad habits because I've read a lot of good books that have these things in them. It's just that if you do these things without thinking about it, it's not going to be your best writing. And you want it to be your best writing. You want to put out your best writing. If taking a couple of days to really dig into and ponder the variations of this and what it means and things like that just makes you more aware of these things while you're writing, then you're going to be a better writer. So all of that is just to say, look at these things, think about these things, and think about what it means for your audience, your messaging, your characters, and just think about whether it's the best choice. Because maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not writing your book. I will gladly edit your book, though. That being said, thank you for joining me today. I hope you have gotten some things to ponder. And if you have any questions or you want to bring up any points or anything like that, you know where to leave your comments. I will gladly have a discussion with people about this because I love talking about the psychological and social ramifications of these things, how they work for individuals, how they work in larger groups, how they work in population demographics, all of that. Yeah. Check out all of my linky links and check out my previous videos. And until next time, we'll see you later. I'm so looking forward to getting some writing done. I need to write. I really need to write. For years and years and years and years, and like maybe the rest of your life until you get old and senile and forget about it. Like me. You say, I only hear what I want to. I don't listen hard. Don't pay attention to the. Okay, yeah, I've lost the words. Does anybody actually know the words to that song? It's a good song though. Because I'm cute, but I'm also old and senile. I mean, the thing is, we just really need to treat all characters like they're people. Fictional people, but people. I am both things. I am the ultimate dichotomy. Because otherwise, they're just like llamas. Llama. Don't stop writing. Da-na-na. Hold on to your pen. I'm just an author and an avid reader, so how should I know any of this stuff? It's just my opinions.